Hey, how's it going, everyone? And welcome back to another edition of FilmForum, the show here on the FilmSpeak channel where we break down the latest topics in the world of movie news and entertainment. I am, of course, your host, Griffin Schiller, and here at FilmSpeak, we like to say that the conversation continues after the credits. And so if you'd like to be a part of that conversation, you're definitely in the right place. Consider subscribing to the channel for more insight, analysis, and interviews behind your favorite movies. And yes, we got a lot to break down today. Theaters are closing down. Will they be around next year to play all of these movies that have gotten delayed? I have no idea. We have a lot to discuss regarding that. Also, Robert Downey Jr. wants there to be a Sherlock Holmes cinematic universe. That's interesting. We're going to definitely touch on that as well. But here to break it down with me, we have Jared from J-Buck Studios. Jared, how's it going, buddy?
What's going on, Griff? Excited to be on this once again, and I don't know, it's weird talking about movies when movies don't really exist. So it'll be interesting.
I know you're like, well, what's the point of having a movie show when it doesn't matter? It's everything. That's what we do on this show. We just bullshit. You know, we just sit around here with mics on our face, and we just mics in our faces and react to the shit storm that's going on.
Ever-changing schedule of movies, essentially. Every 2 weeks, it's like this one move, that one move.
Yeah, no, exactly. And also joining us is FilmSpeak Patreon supporter and actually probably soon to be FilmSpeak contributor, Mr. Zach Marsh. Zach, how's it going, buddy?
Good, Griffin. How are you doing, man?
I'm good, man. It's great to have you on here. Great to have your Toronto Canadian point of view. I think that's missing sometimes from the show, and so I like to bring you on. I like to bring Mike on, the signature Canadians of the channel. I like to bring you guys on so that you can laugh at the rest of us suffering in the United States. So
yeah, well, I'll just make fun of how uncivilized you Americans are. That's all.
It's okay. Did everyone? Easy. I mean, I assume everyone saw the ridiculous propaganda video that was floating around as the president returned home yesterday.
Yeah.
It was like, who brought it? I think it was Kalina who brought up the fact that it was like 2 notes away from being the Avengers theme. Like, they basically tried to rip off the Avengers theme without doing the event. Like what? Come on, guys. Like, what are you
do them?
They hired someone from Fiverr to do the background music.
But honestly, you're probably right.
Yeah,
they probably like the White House, like fucking the whatever their marketing department is or whatever, probably just like went to Fiverr. They're like, hey, listen, can you make something that sounds like it's the Avengers but obviously won't get us sued? I don't know. Hopefully it does get them sued because that would be hilarious. But anyways, in other news that doesn't pertain to, well, I guess it does pertain to COVID, so never mind. Movie theaters are kind of in a bit of a tricky situation here. And so, like, yesterday, or not even yesterday, on Friday, No Time to Die announced, I believe it was Friday or Thursday, I don't even remember the chronology here, but basically, No Time to Die announced that because of, the lack of theaters being open, because of the state of the world right now, they just felt that it was best for them to push their movie back 6 months to April of 2021. So basically a full year from the initial release date of this year. Excuse me. And so that really sent the theater chains into panic mode, basically, because Cineworld and was it Regal Cinemas, who is owned by Cineworld, were basically banking on that film to keep them afloat. And I mean, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but if your entire business model hinges on a third party releasing a movie, or may or may not be releasing a movie for you business to survive, that's not a very sustainable business model. And so while I have like sort of mixed feelings about the whole No Time to Die delay as a whole, I do think it was the right thing to do, right? Like, it was no pun intended, the writing was on the wall. It's sort of like, even though they started ramping up a second marketing campaign, and as stupid as that was, I think we all sort of knew that okay, it probably, yeah, it needed to move. And so with that, it comes as no surprise to me that Regal Cinemas and Cineworld have decided to temporarily close. And, adding to that, I feel like that decision sort of triggered another chain reaction from Warner Brothers and some of the shakeups that were going on there. But before we get to those shakeups and the delays and whatnot, Jared, starting with you, I just sort of want to get your take on the whole No Time to Die delay and the sort of like, trickle down effect it had on Cineworld, obviously shutting down, Regal Cinemas shutting down, and all that stuff. And here's the other thing I'll pose to you. A lot of people are blaming No Time to Die for the closure of this particular theater chain, or the death of cinema, as people are exaggerating. I don't think that's necessarily a fair accusation, but I do want to get your take on it. So, Jared, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I don't think that that's fair at all, because I also saw the argument a lot of people were saying Tenet was the one that ruined it. And I'm like, well, Tenet tried to save it. No one knows what to do right now. Do we put the movie out, make no money at all, at least have it out there, or do we delay it, have to defer all that income, revenue, and whatnot on our statements? Like, it gets into business, it gets into everything like that. Yeah. I think, unfortunately, as we've seen here in the U.S., other places are better. It was only a matter of time for them to delay this movie or do something about it, because with the box office of Tenet, it was not great here domestically and whatnot. And with that movie coming out in a month now, a little over a month.
Yeah, it was about a month away. Yeah,
with these numbers and everything ramping up via COVID and whatnot, I think that it's the safe bet to do. But also, like you have mentioned multiple times on your shows and live streams and whatnot, the marketing that they're putting into this, it's almost impossible to make back money on this movie now if they're going to go full steam ahead on a marketing budget come April. Who knows if even April is going to be a safe time, where it's weird. It's really weird. And then getting into Regal, it's this thing where that's one of the main kind of three. It's like Regal, Cinemark, AMC, and whatnot, for kind of the big theater chains people know of. Right. And with them essentially hibernating for the winter, is this going to cause all of these other movie theaters, maybe not your local mom and pop ones, but like your bigger chains, to essentially close up 50% of them? Who knows what's going to happen with that, because these smaller throwback classics, these indie movies, these ones that they're, Blumhouse has that freaky movie that's coming out next month. These are not going to save the movie theaters, unfortunately.
Yeah, and before we go to Zach, I do want to add that I feel like, there should have been sort of like a coordinated effort between the studios in order to, do this whole like launch and like get theaters back up and running. And the weird thing about this scenario is that there are like several different conversations to be had as a part of the larger conversation. Should movie theaters be reopened? Well, if you take a look at the fact that bowling alleys are opened in certain parts of the country, maybe. Bars, right. But naturally, the places where bars are open in the country, I don't know if that's stupid. Like, just to put it frankly, I feel like you're safer in a movie theater than you are in a bar in South Florida. Let's be honest here. So I feel like there's like a whole bunch of different conversations, and I feel like maybe the governors of some of these hubs, like New York or California, probably could have lifted their restrictions a little bit, because here's the thing: with the whole Tenet reopening and people going back to the theaters, there were no cases, right? Like there were no identifiable cases of the virus and anyone who went back to the theaters to see the films, and the theaters did an excellent job of maintaining safety protocol. At least I had only gone once, and it was to go see the Tenet press screening in Vegas. But my experience there, it was incredibly clean. There was like hand sanitizers everywhere. Everyone was wearing a mask, and so it was just like people were willing to go back, but they were also willing to abide by the rules, and also like the theaters were willing to enforce those rules. And so it's like when you take that into account with the, when Tenet first opens, maybe, some of the governors in some of these states should have looked at the fact that theaters were operating successfully and under, protocol, and maybe go, okay, maybe we lift some of these restrictions so that theaters can be open, but we still need the limited seating capacity. Again, I feel like a lot of this stuff probably would have happened regardless. Like Bond probably would have gotten delayed regardless because of the limited seating capacity. That still kills your film, even if you keep it in theaters longer, and you actually end up losing a little bit more money on that end. So I don't know. There's a lot of sort of conversations to have here. But Zach, I'm going to throw it to you now for this whole thing.
Yeah, well, it's complicated because theaters have been in trouble for a long time. It's way before COVID. There's been a big problem with business models of theaters, and not just mom and pop ones, but like Cineplex is the big one here in Canada. They've been struggling for years. And just, the fact with streaming and video on demand, I like that we have those things, but the effect is people don't go to the theater like they used to.
Right.
And then this happened. So, and it's definitely not the fault of Eon or the fault of No Time to Die that we're in this situation now where like Regal and Cinemark they're on the edge of a cliff. That was just unfortunately kind of the biggest film right now. And I've had an issue with the amount of negative press being thrown at Eon for this, because they're not the ones that destabilized the theater industry. They weren't the ones responsible for the fact that, again, theaters have been in trouble way before COVID. It's just at the end of the day, it's not safe to put a big budget film where you have to have fully packed theaters to make your money back. You can't release that right now. Could you release a Blumhouse film or an A24 film where you can have like 50 seats max and make profit? There's probably a way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you release a $300 million film and make your money back? Maybe if you keep the film in theaters for 18 months, right? Like it's an unsustainable situation. And I don't envy Eon, and I certainly don't envy the theater chains either. It's a bad situation. And I think there was a mistake made with Tenet as well. I think there was too much pressure to force Tenet out, and it worked out really badly for Warner Brothers. Some of the estimates say they're going to lose like $250 million on Tenet. And it was kind of bad for the theaters too, because it kind of gave them like a glimmer of hope, and then, oh no, we can't do this. It's
right.
gone. I think things are worse because Tenet came out than they would have been if it hadn't.
You're probably right.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the thought process though behind wanting to release Tenet. I think the issue I have is, was there no coordinated effort among theaters? And if there was, what just like was there even if there was an attempt, if the response was overwhelmingly negative, like no, we're not going to join you in releasing movies over a period of time, we don't feel like safe for our particular business models, then maybe you really should have just like put a foot down and, Chris, this is not going to go the way you think it's going to go, just from financial projections and everything. Because I understood. Here's the thing: everyone was like, "Oh, Christopher Nolan's going to put his ego on the line and all that stuff like that." I don't necessarily feel like that's necessarily what he was trying to do. He was hoping, right? Maybe foolishly so, hoping that by releasing Tenet in theaters, other studios would start to follow suit. They would be the first one, and then we'd get maybe Mulan in theaters. Maybe we'd get, Candyman in theaters, No Time to Die, so on and so forth. And so it's like you have this like slow ramp up and build of movies coming back to theaters to give people a reason to go back to the theaters. Because here's the thing: there hasn't been a reason realistically for anyone to go back. I mean, Tenet's been out since August, right, or September or whatever. That's legitimately been the only thing playing in the theaters to entice people to go back. And even that is sort of like a niche thing to some people. Yes, Christopher Nolan movies traditionally do very well at the box office, but there is no denying that there are, probably a fair amount of people who are like, decide to take a risk on it. They're like, oh yeah, you know what? He did The Dark Knight. Let's check it out. Why not? Right now, people aren't willing to take that risk to go see the next Christopher Nolan movie. However, people would probably be more willing to go to the theaters if like a Black Widow was out, if a Wonder Woman 1984 was coming out. And so I just don't think that there has been, I understand that there's so much money sunk into those movies, and the studios have every right to delay them until the end of time, like whatever. But I also feel like until you have that one movie that people are going to want to go back to the theaters for, you're never going to know like if this whole thing is going to work. You need that thing to entice people, and so far there hasn't been that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, with Tenet, I'm assuming they were hoping that this would, reignite that love for cinema, get people out there. Unfortunately, it's Tenet and all of these other movie theaters standing in the wings, and they're waiting for someone to make the first move. Tenet went out there. The first weekend box office came out, and everyone's like, nope, we are not doing this. We are not going to throw our movie out there, essentially take a huge loss on the financial side. And like you're saying, Griff, Black Widow, some of those bigger movies, they could potentially throw them out there and see what could happen. You're going to probably get more of the casual movie fan back to the theaters, but just for probably that movie. How do you keep them around, because they're not going to go see maybe a classic. I know, these kind of film buffs like ourselves, we're probably going to maybe go out to the movie theater and see these $5 classics and stuff. But what is keeping people coming back week to week, every other week, whatnot like that? But going back way earlier, the movie theater is probably the safest place I've been to, because they are very much requiring masks. Everywhere you look, you throw your hand out somewhere, all of a sudden there's hand sanitizer on your hand. It's safe. It is a safe place. But people just don't want to go out there because, sure, you've seen Tenet. Now what? Yeah.
And it's also like, why would I go? Like, it's one thing to go to the grocery store and, take that. That's a calculated risk that you have to make in order. It's a necessity in order to live as a person, right? If you go to the movie theater and there's really nothing playing, that's an unnecessary risk. You're just going, and something could happen to you, and it's like, is it really worth it? So it's like there's a difference between those sort of things, because I agree, the movie theaters have been incredibly safe, probably because they have a microscope over them. People are like watching, almost like waiting for them to fuck up in some capacity so they can be like, look, see, this was a bad idea. This was a bad idea, and nothing's happened.
And it's so weird that they're only doing that kind of for movie theaters, or maybe it's because we're so into it. We love film. We're always up on top of the news, but it doesn't feel like all of these other industries, or, hell, even bars, like that's the biggest one. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, there's no reason bars should be open.
No.
No reason. And I'm like, my other life is like, I'm a gigging musician. I haven't played a gig in 8 months. Right, so I would love bars to be open. I had center bars be open. They shouldn't be open at all, and it's ridiculous that there's been such a push for them to be, because it's like the most unsafe thing. Right. I think as far as movie theater, all the scrutiny around movie theaters, it kind of ties into like just a lot of press around films and entertainment. Like people love when there's a catastrophe. Like I remember when Joker came out, and there was a whole push of like, oh, there's going to be another shooting when this movie comes in theaters, and that didn't happen. And then it was like, there was like an audible disappointment among a bunch of film journalists that there wasn't something terrible that happened, because they didn't have anything to report on. Yeah. Right. So it's just kind of, I think that's why there's been so much focus on theaters, and why people are so, they almost want a COVID outbreak to start at the theater.
Yeah. Yeah, they right. There is something to say about needing a story, and yeah, I guess there's a little bit of fear mongering going on for sure. But to that point, I guess moving away from like Regal specific. Well, here's the other thing. Do you, before we move away from Regal and Cineworld closing and all that stuff like that, do you feel like that this is the beginning of? I don't want to be a doomsday prophet here or whatever, but some people are saying this. Do you think that this is the beginning of the end of movie theaters? Because while Regal is closing, while Cineworld is closing, temporarily, I want to emphasize, they are not going under. They're not bankrupt or anything. It's just a temporary closure to sustain their business model, because nothing's in theaters. While they're doing that, AMC is still remaining open, maybe foolishly so. Only time will tell and see whether or not they close up shop or whatever. How do you think this affects them, going into next year? Do you think that this is, in fact, the beginning of the end of movie theaters? Zach, let's start with you.
I don't. I think it's the beginning of the end of the way movie theaters are right now. The thing I'm really worried about is because people will go, like, when COVID will be gone eventually, people will always want to go to a movie theater. There will always be an audience for that. And my concern is that there will be some kind of big corporate stimulus from some billionaire who will like just own movie theaters as a thing. Like there'll be like a Zuckerberg that just basically all the theaters close, they kind of go bankrupt, and someone comes along and it's just this giant Disney-esque corporate thing that's all sterilized and doesn't feel the way movie theaters used to. That's my biggest worry, is that movie theaters will kind of turn into that. I didn't really phrase that. I didn't articulate that well. But that's my biggest fear. I don't think we're going to live in a world where there's no movie theaters at all, where it's like some Mad Max kind of dystopia. That just doesn't seem realistic, because I think there will always be people that want to go to a theater.
Right. Jared?
Yeah. I think that, the with Regal making their announcement, it was very much like, oh no, they're taking away my movies, which I mean, from a business point of view, it's like we got to save money, because we don't know how long this is going to go. We don't know. There's really nothing that's bringing in a significant chunk of revenue to keep us open, to pay our employees, to pay for supplies, to pay our rent and stuff like that. I think that this is the beginning, and I kind of, said it because, it's the winter and everything. This is the beginning of hibernation for movie theaters. Like, they are probably going to go away for the next handful of months until an actual big movie is going to ramp up that again. Regal's the first one. I honestly think AMC will slowly do that. I know that there's 3 different AMCs in my town. 2 of them are complete trash. I could see those ones closing and keeping the nicer one open, or maybe after all of this happens, those 2 lesser theaters just close. They close down. So this could in turn hurt the movie industry a little bit, with theaters that maybe in an oversaturated area, they close up shop a little bit. But also, didn't Netflix at one point buy a theater chain or something? Or am I crazy?
Like that, yeah, because Netflix has certain things, because for awards purposes, the film has to be in theater, a certain number of theaters. So Netflix did something. I don't know if they bought theaters or they just have some kind of distribution deal with some theaters. But they have something in place.
Now,
I remember something like that.
I don't think necessarily they'll do this tomorrow, but I could see Netflix, I could see potentially Amazon Studios jumping in and potentially buying up some of these theaters and kind of doing their thing, so then they have a place to put movies for award season, but also have another source of income. Again, I don't think that it's a smart business choice for either of them right now, because it's like, I just bought this movie theater. Now it's eating into my bottom line. Like, I could see them maybe picking up some of those that, bigger chains sell off. But then again, it's kind of like, is that in their business model?
Right. Yeah. I know that's a good point. I feel like it's something that maybe and I said this during the Bond video that I was doing, maybe something that the studio should have considered was doing like a split release. Playing it, basically what Netflix has been doing for all of their awards contenders, playing the films in theaters for a handful of weeks, dropping it on VOD and something like that. Because I agree with you. Yeah, I like the thing where Netflix was buying up local theaters or small independent theaters in order to like show their films there in order to get that theatrical run before dumping it on their platform. That might be sort of what happens going forward. Here's the thing that I want to make very clear. I don't think movie theaters are going away. There will always be movie theaters in some capacity, one way or the other, because people enjoy that theatrical experience. Even if it is like even if it eventually becomes like a novelty thing, they will still be there. Will AMC and Regal still be there? That's up for debate. They very well go under, which would be sad, but like, you know, then I'm sure some other tech company will buy, or you know, this could even happen. A tech company could like buy them out in order to keep them afloat, and then just like completely rebrand them or whatever and turn it into their theater chain. And so like, you know, now Apple has a theater chain that they can screen all their stuff at, and then also other, you know, companies can make deals with them in order to play their movies there or something. I have no idea. That's just like one, you know, hypothetical scenario. But I feel like that's probably the way this is going to go. It's not going to be. It's going to go through a restructure, I think, is what's going to happen as a result of this. But they aren't going away. Like the people, like, you know, the death of movie theaters and stuff like that. That's not going to happen. I don't think the industry that needs theaters in order for their business model to sustain is going to let theaters go away like that. So that's sort of where I'm. You know, with that whole thing, I don't really buy into the whole doomsday prophesizing and stuff like that.
Griff, the way that you're putting that, for some reason in my mind, I'm playing like Last of Us, and someone stumbles into a movie theater and like, they used to show moving pictures on this screen, and people would eat popcorn. Like, what?
Yeah,
and that kind of what you said, Griffin, kind of ties into like my concern about like the studios, like an Amazon theater or a Netflix theater. Like this, do you want to have an Amazon theater where you can, your choices are just Amazon movies?
Well, that's if it's only Amazon movies, no. But on the flip side, you know, if it does keep smaller independent theaters alive in some capacity, even if it is showing exclusively Amazon films, I think that is a good thing. I know I keep saying we're going to move on to the different topic, but I think this is important. The other thing that is really tragic about this that I tweeted out the other day that I don't think people really understand are the amount of jobs that are going to be lost in the process. Yeah. The amount of people who rely, like movie theaters are very much like people rely on that as an entryway into, you know, whatever career path they're choosing. You know, a lot of people coming out of high school rely on movie theaters as their first job. You know, even people who have been working in theaters longer than that, like that is their steady gig in order to pursue other things, or it's just like the occupation that's always been there for them. All of these people are getting displaced. And that to me is the most tragic and heartbreaking thing about this whole scenario, are the amount of people who are going to be out of work and who are out of work right now, and we have no idea when they're going to go, when or if they'll be able to go back to work the same way that they did. You know, that's and I don't think people talk about that enough when they talk about the closing of theaters, or like, oh, you know, they should have just closed back up shop. These places are businesses, and they have employees that they have trusted and like, you know, who have worked for them for years and stuff like that, and they want to make sure that like they're doing what they can to keep their employees like stable, because it's not like they can just like, I mean, when the businesses themselves are hemorrhaging, it's not like they can just pay for them, like pay for their like time off or something like that. You know, it's like they're incapable of doing that. And so I don't know, that to me, that's the part that I think people should be considering more when they're talking about like the closing of theaters and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, I feel like an asshole for not, you know, talking about that up top, because obviously, you know, people, this is very much hurting the everyday man and whatnot. People that are, you know, working for a paycheck and stuff. And especially this time of year is not a great time to have that happen to you, because who knows, it could be a couple months, it could be longer. And trying to, you know, here in the US, there's holidays and whatnot. It's not great for, especially if you have a family that you're trying to support and stuff. It's gonna really change the landscape for just, the next few months for them.
Yeah, for sure. Zach, I don't know if you have anything to add on that, but
Well, I think you covered it pretty well, Griffin. I mean, it's just it's really sad these are big as far as the workforce. These are big businesses. Like you go to a theater and there's staff members left, right, and center. They do employ a lot of people, and it's hard to think about if a theater goes under, what do these people do next? Where do they go if this is their only had? Where can they send their resume into after, right? Other than like a theater. So it's concerning to me, especially because these are the people that they make theaters what they are, the things that we enjoy. So I just think just acknowledging them and like you said, calling attention to their plight is important, because it's not being talked about enough, and it's kind of pissed me off that everyone's talking about the CEO of AMC. I don't know who that is, and what their future might be like. Well, what about the guy who sweeps the floors at AMC?
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. Agreed. Going back to the whole the streaming, owned theaters and stuff like that. I think Mariana from Impressure Blend brings up a really good point here. She says, but if streaming services keep buying and producing better films and not going to a Netflix theater in anything, they're less likely to play it safe. And then she follows that up with, content-wise, they're more likely to take risks with what they release and give creative freedom. That's true. And that's like the thing that I think has been Netflix's big thing right now, is like they're the place that are giving the money to filmmakers in order to create the product that they want to make, and so you're right. If something like a Netflix theater opened up, you have so much diverse content, and then also you have filmmakers who might be willing to go to them to produce their movie, knowing that it's going to play in this theater, that Netflix is going to give them creative freedom. And so now you might be in this is the interesting about this, you might be in an interesting scenario where the studios are almost competing among themselves to see who can offer the most creative freedom, because if Netflix is going to offer you the most creative freedom and you get to play your movie, your film in a theater, that's a 1-2 punch. Like that's a great deal for you. And so this might retroactively be like a good thing for filmmakers that that don't want to have their vision compromised and stuff like that. My only thing is like I don't know how often, or if they'll ever want to greenlight big blockbusters because or stuff like that, like stuff like Nolan is making. Obviously, if it's like a comic book film or whatever, I can see them wanting to do that. But how many original Nolan films are going to get the price tag that he's gotten over the years? So I don't know, but that is an interesting thing to think about, for sure. I don't know if you guys had anything to add on that, but
no. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go first.
I was just gonna say, Griff, you have a great point there, where Netflix is very much they're like roll the dice, see what happens, and I feel like they kind of have a certain budget for certain films, but if they do start to break into that blockbuster territory, then they might have something on their hands. I guess my thing is, I'm curious how many people, they'd almost have to do it where it's like in the theaters for a select time and then on Netflix, which they kind of do now,
right?
With some of their award contention.
Right, and if it's a Netflix-owned theater, then they are netting 100% of that profit,
yes.
or at least a good majority of that profit.
Yeah, because if you don't have that window, what's really enticing people to leave their couch to go to the movie? But I think that if they do have that window, then they have something on their hands.
Yeah, for sure. Zach?
Well, there definitely there has to be a buffer between the movie comes out in the theater and comes out in streaming. Otherwise, I can just queue it up on my TV. Mm-hmm. But I think the reason that I was concerned about the idea of a streaming service specific theater is because just quality wise, Netflix on its best month is still, the movies they put out are pretty uneven. Right. And
I guess that's true.
They're not at a point, right? They're not doing blockbusters, things like that. And for me going to the theater, what I do is this might be a stupid question, but you guys have cheap Tuesdays down there, right?
Mhm.
That's not just a Canada thing. Like
there's like deals like that. Yeah. And for sure.
So what I usually do is I go like every Tuesday and I see like 4 movies in a day.
Oh shit!
But I like being able to have the variety of like I can go and see like Endgame, and then I can walk in and see like I don't know, like a Joker kind of film, or like a small, like a lower budget movie in the same day. And I don't think you get that variety with any individual streaming service. I think there's kind of a sameness to a lot of what they put out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It kind of feels like something it'd be really sterilized. It'd be like a big movie theater almost, in a way. So that's if they can change the way that they make movies and the kind of movies they make, it's something I'd be more open to. But just based on how streaming services are now and the concept they have, I'm not very keen on like the idea of a Netflix theater just for that reason, because I just don't think it wouldn't be different enough week to week going to the theater for me.
Yeah, for sure. Guys, we covered a lot there regarding the future of movie theaters and just, Regal, Cineworld, and all that stuff going under. Be sure to continue that conversation in the live chat here, or if you're watching on the replay, down in the comments section below. But we're going to move on to our main topic of the day, and that is the delay of the Batman, Dune, the Matrix 4, all that stuff. We're going to be chatting about that here in a sec. So let me pull up the article real quick and make sure that Zach isn't covered. His face is literally covered by that.
There
So there we go. And make sure you were covered there. So yes, so this is, I'm obviously pulling this up on Collider, but it was announced yesterday that Warner Brothers was going to be delaying Dune, pushing it out of December 2020 into October of 2021, which, everyone was like, okay, that's going to have a conflict with the Batman. And so obviously Warner Brothers later that evening decided to shift Batman back to March 4th of 2022. And then some of the other moves that we have now are the Matrix 4 moving from April 1st, 2022 to December 22nd, 2021. So that's moving forward a little bit. The Flash moves from June 3rd, 2022 to November 4th, 2022. Shazam 2 from November 4th of 2022 to June 2nd of 2023, which is, I think that's like one of the first films I've heard that has been pushed back to 2023. Like, that's wild.
It's like 10 years from now.
Yeah, I know. It's. I think even like David F. Sandberg made a joke about it on Twitter. He was like, he had a picture of like Shazam and one of the kids, and they were like old or something. Like it was just kind of funny. He's like, guys, we're gonna be this old when it comes out. So yeah, and then Black Adam was just taken off the release date calendar. But yeah, so Zach, let's go to you first. Obviously, this isn't really much of a surprise, but do you have any thoughts on this whole thing? A lot of people were banking on Dune. Well, I don't think a lot of people, and I think we all knew Dune was going to get delayed, but theaters were banking on the possibility of Dune coming out this year. And it's not going to. So yeah. Anyways, what is your take on that whole thing?
Well, I forgot to bring it up earlier, but this is just reminding me of just holy shit, guys! Put movies on streaming services. Like why is it like the clinging to the guns of like, oh, we have to put this out in theaters. We have to put all these out in theaters. Like, studios need to make a decision, at least like they need to look at their upcoming slates and like they need to pick like 50% of the movies and put them on, make a deal with Netflix or make a deal to put them on pay-per-view or something, because we're getting like the Shazam thing is emblematic of it. We're getting 3-year delays of movies now because there's so many things that are backed up and no one's budging on any of them. They all have to come out in theaters, and it's just that's my biggest thought is there needs to be concessions made, and like, okay, this can't be on the big screen. This has to go on the small screen so that we can just release it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's been the big thing that I've been sort of like, that I've been thinking about it, which is like, okay, you can't just keep pushing stuff back and like backloading your slate. You have to dump stuff on streaming platforms when and where you can. Obviously, with Warner Brothers having HBO Max, that provides them with a great opportunity for that. But Jared, what are the odds that any of these properties go to HBO Max? I mean, obviously they're not gonna. The Batman is gonna be in theaters. Dune's gonna be in theaters. Like they're big, top tier films. Those are gonna be in theaters. But like something like I don't know,
Black Adam.
Maybe Black Adam. Like, is that better suited for HBO Max?
Yeah, it's weird because I think those ones that they're keep pushing back and back and back have those big names that will draw a crowd, or it has a huge production budget that they're like, there's absolutely no way we can make this money back on this VOD platform with $10, $15, $20, whatever the hell premium VOD means. Because I think that landscape is still new for these movies because they've tried it with a handful of other ones, Trolls World Tour, King of Staten Island, and
Apparently, Trolls World Tour is like they made a whole bunch of money. It's like the highest grossing film of the year. If you ask Universal, obviously I don't think that's the case, and they were probably lying a little bit. But
the highest grossing outside of theaters, like as far as pay per view, it made a ton. Like it's massive success. But there are movies that were like Bad Boys for Life made more money.
Oh right, yeah, for sure. Right.
But they're not wrong about it being the most successful of the year on that format specifically.
Yeah, no, I think that whole premium VOD, the VOD platform where they're throwing these bigger name movies is still a weird landscape because no one really knows the true numbers and how much is getting split and all that stuff. But I mean, a good example of a movie that they HBO Max just transitioned over was The Witches. That new remake, which again,
smart
that's not
move.
Good. Yeah,
Smart move.
It's very smart. I mean, Halloween, it's going to, that spooky factor. And also, I don't think that was one that was going to really draw too many people in. So I think that's perfect because that also drives people to your streaming platform for more kind of top tier content, essentially, because, a lot of people have had qualms with HBO Max because they're like, oh, they're putting these on, they're taking these off, they're putting these on, they're taking these off. But I think that this is a great way to really pad that material. Unfortunately, it's these blockbuster, action-packed ones and superhero movies, comic book ones, that I just don't think they're going to do. And if they do, because they keep moving it, you look at 2021, 2022, every single week has at least one big blockbuster movie. Where's the money going to come from? No one knows.
That was one of my big reservations about No Time to Die moving to April of next year. As I'm like, okay, so yeah, you've got a month in between No Time to Die and F9. You're obviously going to cut off the tail end of their theatrical run with that F9. That's what people are going to go see. And then on top of that, you've just got like blockbuster movie after blockbuster movie after blockbuster movie coming out, and I feel like as a result, all of those films are going to take a hit because some of them didn't come out either this year or go straight to streaming or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that, and I think this is going to have a whole trickle down effect to the point where like studios are going to be less likely to front the money for massive films like an Endgame or something like that. And we're going to see a rise of the mid-budget movie. And in fact, like in most of the filmmakers that I have gotten the chance to like chat with over the past months and just like, what they think of the situation going on here, the consensus seems to be small, single location ideas, or just like mid-budget films. It's going to be really hard to, justify putting out money for like a $250 million film when the returns aren't guaranteed,
Oh yeah, 100%. I think that the next 5 years, who knows, even further out from that, these studios are very much going to be risk averse. Sure, with Batman, these bigger budget or bigger name movies, they're gonna throw a little bit more money into them, maybe scale back a little bit, but they know that people are gonna go out for those names. But like, maybe an unknown property that they're like, okay, this is a great idea, but we have to pump $150 million into it. They're like, nope, no, we can make 5 other movies instead of just one movie.
Right. Well, and the and the other thing is it's going to force filmmakers to get creative, to go back to the way things used to be, where it's like you had to stretch a budget as far as you can. People like Lee Winnell are going to excel in this type of filmmaking environment, where they, like, you know, he grew up or he came up in the industry having to use like a couple of grand, or not a couple of grand, but like, you know, $7 million for Invisible Man, however the hell much they got to make Saw. And so I think you're going to get a whole bunch of like filmmakers who really know how to utilize a budget that are just going to be killing it, you know, going forward. But yeah, Zach, I'm going back to you with that.
So I was listening to you guys. I'm like blanked on what the question was originally.
Just what do you think like the landscape is going to be like with like studios having to adjust to, you know, in terms of blockbuster filmmaking, just like adjusting to the situation that they're in, and especially with like all of these blockbusters sort of like coming out and like the money getting thrown all over the place in returns, and films not making the amount that they probably would make otherwise.
Right. So similar to how like the honestly the box office failure of Tenet kind of made people, like other studios, averse to releasing their blockbusters. I think the fact that we're kind of looking at a situation where there's going to be like a string of movies blockbusters that lose money is going to make studios averse to making more. Mm-hmm. Except for like I could see the MCU finding a way to push on because they're already in too deep, but like I think a lot of studios are going to want to go to like a Lee Winnell, and I think we're going to see an uptick in smaller films.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the landscape, is movies like the Invisible, not genre wise like the Invisible Man, but movies where, you know, someone can take $7 million and make. I just watched it for the first time.
Oh, $7
million and make that.
Yeah.
I don't know how the fuck Lee Winnell did that.
I don't know. It's just like the fact that he just knows how to stretch a budget. Like it's crazy. Yeah. Him and Blumhouse know how to stretch a budget, which is the impressive thing about that. The Geeky Gator asks an interesting question here, which is, do you think if Mulan was a success, they would have charged you for The Witches on HBO Max? Thoughts?
No, because they're not Disney.
Okay, but they still want to make money here. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily like where I'd go. But
okay, let me rephrase. They wouldn't have charged you $30. They might have charged you like $7.
Okay, interesting, Jared.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking that Disney, they're kind of doing what they want to do. I don't think that it necessarily would have been. It wouldn't be $30. It would be maybe $15 or something on top of that, and somehow do a new tier, or they're just going to throw it on there because they want to get more people over to the platform. It's an interesting thing to think about for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the other thing is the history of the model shown with streaming services that you put content on, people will subscribe, right? You know, you don't have to sell your movie on the streaming platform. Like you can make the money by getting people to subscribe,
right?
You know, and that's what you need to do. That's why Netflix has dominated this for almost a decade, because they keep putting content on, and as a result, I get their subscription price has gone up a little bit over time, but other than that, they haven't needed to gouge people because they're making a ton of money by just constantly putting things on the platform.
Right. We should note though that I think that Netflix is in debt a fair amount, and they are probably going to struggle to get out of debt for the foreseeable. I mean, they've basically been in debt ever since they started business. So I in a larger sense, I have no idea how the hell they're able to sustain as a business. It's honestly kind of impressive to me. But it's just, the thing I find it interesting is that Netflix is now in a position where it's like, everyone is looking to them because they've been doing it for so long and they know the landscape, and they're like, oh, you guys don't know how to operate without movie theaters. Oh, fun. Welcome to our world. So it's just sort of like an interesting thing that's happening here with these, recent Warner Brothers delays. I almost wonder, obviously none of us would want to see this happen just because we're used to seeing it on big IMAX screens, but it's like, would Dune have been like a good film to drop on HBO Max solely for the fact that if they're planning on having like a Dune series on HBO Max and people are like, what the hell is this thing that they're coming up with? If you introduce that by putting by premiering Dune on HBO Max, is that like something that should be considered? Obviously, I think all of us are going to have the knee-jerk reaction of, no, let's see that on the massive IMAX theater, screen, the biggest screen we possibly can. But I think, maybe just taking into account everything that's going on, I don't know, is it worth entertaining that idea?
I mean, that is a movie, like, from just the trailer, that's one I want to see on the big screen. But just from the film fan, the groups that we run around with, film Twitter, they are going to be just getting at least 1 month of HBO Max just to see that movie. So if you did look at that and it's like, okay, there's $15 per person, sure, it's not going to make as much money as probably the movie theater, but that could be the beginning of testing the waters. Again, I don't know if you want to do it with that movie because that's
because they sunk a lot of money into
risk.
It. Yeah. Just the fact that it got made is a massive risk, and they sort of need the risk to pay off. But yeah, Zach.
So this might be a surprising answer for someone who goes to theaters a lot and I'm a big champion of movie theaters. I have no problem with movies being released on streaming services. There is no movie that I think is too good for Netflix or for the small screen, including something like Dune. Like my favorite movie is Lawrence of Arabia, which is a giant epic CinemaScope. I saw it for the first time on like a 20-inch television when I was like 7 years old. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel like I lost anything. I saw it finally in a theater earlier this year. And yes, I appreciated that, and it added to the experience. But I'm not with film Twitter of like, oh, you're not getting the movie if you don't see it in the theater. It's you're getting a different element to the experience of watching it, but it's still fundamentally the same movie. So I'm completely fine with them. I would be completely fine with something like that if they had put Dune on HBO Max. I think that would have actually been kind of cool, and it would have been worth subscribing to HBO Max for.
Yeah, I think that's, listen, like us purists and people who love the theatrical experience and all that stuff, we don't want to see that. But for the general people who are, it's already like a stretch to try and get them on board with Dune, right? It's already such a niche film. It's like which is why it's a risk regardless. If you put that thing on HBO Max, like I don't know. I feel like it would do well. No, I don't think it would do the numbers that it would probably do in a normal theatrical marketplace. But I guess the other thing is like Blade Runner 2049 made like 80 million, and it like cost way more than that. So it's like I don't know. Is Dune going to make around the same ballpark as Blade Runner 2049, or is it just like is it already appealing to more people? I have no idea. That's sort of been the thing that I've been trying to figure out this entire time is just like, is Dune like, is it just going to be another Blade Runner type movie? So I don't know. It is interesting to think about. But the one omission from this list of delays that was that was sort of like strange to me was Wonder Woman 1984. That's still slated for December 25th, Christmas of this year. With Regal going under, like, are they just like I have to imagine it's going to move eventually, right? Or are they going to maybe test the waters with that film, which I think honestly wouldn't be a bad idea because it is like name brand superhero action film during the holidays. I don't know, Zach, what do you think about that?
I honestly I don't know. I didn't realize, I hadn't noticed that they hadn't moved it. I'm not sure how they can make that work because unless I'm mistaken, that wasn't a cheap movie. You know, they can't like just put it out and make like $50 million at the box office and they call it a day. That needs to, you know, really move some tickets. So December, it just doesn't seem realistic to me, unless they deliberately want it to be a flop. Because it just seems like it's
deliberately, yes,
Yeah,
they deliberately want their like $1 million superhero sequel to one of the most acclaimed comic book films of all time to be a flop.
It doesn't seem there's any scenario where they release that movie in December and it makes money.
Right, right, Jared.
Yeah, I just I did a quick Google search and it claims that the production budget, or the budget, I guess, is $200 million. They've already done a lot.
Modest 200 million.
400 on it then.
You
Yeah.
know? Yeah, they go out, pick up a few cans, you know, cash those in. That's $200 million right there. I think that they've already put so much into marketing that film, because God, you see that trailer everywhere, essentially, whenever I was going to the movie theaters. Plus, they did that whole DC fandom, pumping everyone up. Now these movies don't even exist anymore. That is a weird one, because you think with all of this other stuff that came out with the delays, and Wonder Woman is mysteriously missing, I don't think it's coming out this Christmas. If it does,
I mean, I don't think I'd be shocked if it did, but it is like you said, it is interesting that was the one film that was missing from their announcements. When you think it'd be like number one on their list, if they're gonna move Dune, when they move Wonder Woman, like I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, I was just gonna say the other angle that I think, like, could this be where they test the waters with like HBO Max with this movie?
Yeah, that might be the case. Or they might do the split release, which it's still mind blowing to me that studios aren't considering a split release of like the limited window and theatrical, and then like, you know, then they'll announce the date for the streaming service or whatever. I don't know. To me, that's the way these studios should be, like, you know, thinking about. But yeah, I mean, maybe they are entertaining the idea because they do realize that, okay, maybe we actually have to give them something big on a streaming platform in order for them to, you know, in order for it to like work. Because there hasn't been that big movie. Like, this is, again, I keep going back to Black Widow because it is the perfect film to debut on a streaming service. One, Marvel's Phase 4 is primarily dealing in television on Disney Plus. Premiere your big movie on Disney Plus as a sort of like, hey guys, the new wave of content is going to be on this platform, starting with Black Widow. Great entry point. Also, it's a story that takes place before the events of Endgame. Another reason why, like, it's not that it's inconsequential, but it just adds more texture to the characters and whatnot. And obviously, I think it's going to tie into Falcon and Winter Soldier, but it's like, you know, I feel like if you didn't watch Black Widow, you would still understand the MCU at large and whatnot. Yes, I understand the notion of wanting, you know, Scarlett Johansson and the character to be on the big screen with their own solo film for the first time. It's something we would all want because she deserves it. And really, this film should have happened probably like a decade ago or something like that. But I think just given the circumstances, you kind of have to just look at it and be like, okay, maybe this would be better suited for that. So if Black Widow isn't going to do that, maybe Wonder Woman 1984 is the best option, you know?
No, and that's the thing. Again, it is still a mystery around this film of what is going to go on with it. Sure, they could go experimental and, you know, try all of these different things, you know, where you're saying that split release, you know, I think Impression Blend said something about the drive-in route.
Yeah, she was saying, Marion was saying the
but
drive-in
the
route
thing
one
is,
was,
I guess here in the U.S., half the country it's winter. Drive-ins probably aren't going to be a thing or open and whatnot. There's pros and cons to kind of all of these different releases of, are we going to make the money back? Are we going to get the people to watch it? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Zach?
Sorry, I was so focused on listening that
it's okay. No. You're all good. It's just like, do you think that Wonder Woman is going to, like, does Wonder Woman now have the opportunity that Black Widow had in terms of just like doing the split release from theatrical and digital to like the digital streaming, all that stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just in general the ball's in that movie's court, because it's. I mean, isn't it like the one big thing remaining this year?
I think it is. Yeah, I don't think there's because West Side Story moved not too long ago. I mean, so there is Soul, and they're saying that they want to still go for a theatrical release. I think that thing's going to do the premiere access thing, like they did with Mulan. You know. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. A couple things here that people were saying in the chat when we were talking about theaters. Scott Sullivan, even putting the experience aside, I feel like films that debut on streaming have less staying power and won't get remembered years in the future. Interesting point. I do kind of see where you're coming from, because I don't think we've had that project that's hit streaming that is really that has remained in the conversation. That's an interesting one. I don't know. Is there a film that you guys can think of that is still like that people still sort of like talk about and whatnot that did debut on streaming?
Yeah, I don't think it's a fair argument, because streaming services haven't really been around that long, and I think there are tons of films that will be that have come out last. Like I think like Marriage Story will be a film that's talked about.
Yeah, The Irishman for sure. Too.
Irishman.
Well, because those films are on Criterion now, so it's like they have a life somewhere else. Yeah, for
that's
sure.
The thing. I mean, even like things like Roma.
Yeah,
will be probably. What was the other? Parasite. Parasite was theatrical.
Yeah.
What was the other Netflix? There was another Netflix one that was put on Criterion.
I'm blanking.
I forget, but I think that there hasn't been enough time to make that argument.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because there's just staying power is something that really you can only judge at least a decade after a movie comes out, and none of these movies are even a decade old. In fact, I don't even know if any of them are 5 years old at this point.
Well, okay, here's the one that I was actually going to bring up that I'm glad the Geeky Gator brought up, which is The Interview. That movie had a really odd release, and I think it did debut digitally first because of the whole debacle. And we definitely still remember that whole film, just if anything, for shock factor and just sort of whatnot. But yeah, also Scott saying, I think that is the best option. 2 to 3 week theatrical release, then streaming. Best of both worlds to make both types of moviegoers happy. Exactly. I think that's realistically where we're going to get to in terms of theatrical releases, and it's something that at least for me, like I'm puzzled that studios. I mean, I'm sure they've been entertaining the idea, but I'm sure they have. I'm kind of puzzled as to why they haven't, gone through with some of that stuff, because there are films that I like, mid-budget movies where I think probably would succeed in that sort of release model. Even something like No Time to Die probably would have done well with that release model. So I don't know, just an interesting thing to think about there. But anyways, guys. Go ahead.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Griff, before you go on, I think that the whole thing is, I guess from my point of view, there isn't anything necessarily that's Netflix, for example, that's like, oh my gosh, I remember that, blah, blah, blah. And also, I think it's just because the way people watch stuff now, they go to the top 10 every single week. It's like, oh, this is the next, oh, this one's the most streamed today. And people watch it, and then it disappears. Like, who's talking about Tiger King? Who's talking about that? What's that one movie where they couldn't see the things with the blindfold?
Bird Box.
Yeah. Who the hell's talking about that? For like 2 months, that was the hottest thing, and now it's poof.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is the content on Netflix seems to make a big splash instantly, and then it's like sort of like, because of the age of instant gratification and moving on to the next best thing, it does get forgotten, or maybe not forgotten, but at least it just sort of like loses that momentum and whatnot. So anyways, guys, that's where we're at right now with the delays of movies and everything. The Batman, Dune, all these Warner Brothers projects getting pushed back. What do you all think, though? Let us know in the chat, and then also let us know down in the comment section below. Do you think that this was the best move? Do you think maybe some of these projects should have gotten shifted to a streaming platform at some point, or of some sort? Let's sort of continue that conversation as we move on here. Okay, so moving on to the next one, we're going to move away from this whole theatrical discussion. We're going to talk about two really bizarre pieces of movie news here, and we're going to start with the fact that Robert Downey Jr. apparently is planning a Sherlock Holmes cinematic universe. Listen, I love the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes films. I've been waiting for Sherlock Holmes 3 for a long time, so like this does intrigue me, and I might be one of the few people who actually likes Game of Shadows more than the original Sherlock Holmes. So anyways, so basically the news here, I have the article pulled up from Collider and stuff and such. There's been a lot of like incarnations of Sherlock Holmes over the years. Obviously, we've had the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock show, which is massively successful. We just had Enola Holmes drop with Millie Bobby Brown, which a lot of people have been digging. And so Robert Downey Jr. Is now making a case for a Sherlock Holmes cinematic universe. And according to, Fast Company, the producer wants to turn Sherlock Holmes into just that. And this is the quote right here that he says. Let me see if I can highlight it. Whoop. Or maybe I can't because this is the world that we live in. Okay, he says, "Why do a third movie if you're not going to be able to spin off into some real gems of diversity and other times and elements?" said Downey, speaking to a panel about the possibility and irrelevance of simply making a third Sherlock Holmes film. At this point, we really feel that there is not a mystery verse built out anywhere, and Conan Doyle is the definitive voice in the arena. I think to this day, first of all, the Benoit Blanc and Hercule Poirot erasure will not stand. Second of all, I love mysteries, and while I'm a little cinematic universe out at the moment, I will pretty much take any new entry in the space that I can. So I think I messed up a little bit there. There was a little bit of the author's sort of personal input on the matter, but he's basically saying that he thinks that it's still why not do something like that? Why not spin off into different sort of avenues there and such? So I don't know. It's an interesting thing to sort of entertain because why it just seems like an odd thing to do, but also I guess with all of these incarnations and why not start to sort of cross them over? I don't know. I understand where he's coming from. I don't know if Sherlock Holmes is necessarily the character to do this. So, Zach, starting with you, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm Sherlock Holmes out. There's been too much Sherlock Holmes the past 15 years. The Guy Ritchie movies, and then the series, and there's Elementary. And then there's another. There's a third Sherlock show that aired and had one season because it got canceled because it couldn't compete with the oversaturation. So that's the one idea. The other thing too is, I haven't seen Enola Holmes yet, but isn't that kind of an effort to branch out Sherlock Holmes into some kind of universe?
Yeah, it sort of is. Yeah, it's
isn't it essentially a spin-off?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they technically could because, Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a ton of books.
Yeah.
Sherlock Holmes. There is a ton of source material. It's like with Dune, right? Tyler Tompkins was talking about how they could make 10 sequels to Dune with the source material.
Mm-hmm.
They could probably make 15 movies out of the Sherlock Holmes. Or if they want to do what they did with Poirot, where they just made that amazing series that was just adaptations of the Agatha Christie works that ran for 25 seasons, and it was just book after book after book. So I'd actually, that's the thing I'd be interested in seeing is more than a cinematic universe of Sherlock Holmes. Why not a Sherlock Holmes series that's just period piece adaptations of the novels?
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Downey's comment here, basically saying at this point we really don't feel that there is that there's a mystery verse built out anywhere, and Conan Doyle is the definitive voice of that arena to this day. The author or the writer of this article basically saying, Benoit Blanc and Hercule Poirot, they're right there doing great things, especially with like Knives Out, right? Like just coming out, getting people excited about the murder mystery genre again. Sherlock Holmes is almost like the one that people are burnt out on, right? Like Poirot and Blanc are like the you know, the Agatha Christie sort of inspired stuff. That's the stuff that people are getting really excited about because of, you know, we get to see Kenneth Branagh and a silly mustache or whatever. I have no idea if Death on the Nile will be good, but like it's interesting and different. Knives Out opened up a whole new realm of possibilities, and obviously Rian Johnson is going to be working on a sequel to that. So it's like we don't need this cinematic universe of like detective work for Sherlock Holmes. That like I see what he's saying, but it's also like you're blatantly not acknowledging the fact that Knives Out and Murder on the Orient Express and all these other Agatha Christie adaptations, you know, the Blanc, the Hercule, sorry, not the Blanc, the Hercule Poirot stuff exists. So I don't know. That's sort of where I'm at with it. But yeah, Jared, going over to you with this.
Yeah. I guess this is odd news. I mean, I do appreciate and like the first two films that he did. Like, I like the aesthetic, what is done in those slow motion scenes and stuff. But
They're
it's
great.
just like, oh yeah, it's wonderful. But the thing is, like, yeah, Perot and what's the other dude?
Blanc.
Yeah, they're like the new hot dudes in town. Like people want to kind of see what they're up to, even though in reality you could just slip any of these guys into the mystery. Sure, they're bringing their own personality, their own look, their own mustache and stuff, but it's a mystery, you know. It's fun. I'm curious though, yeah, with Enola Holmes, I'm wondering if this is going to open up a whole new thing of, hey, we're going to have Sherlock, we're going to have Mycroft, we're going to have a Moriarty film, we're going to have Enola Holmes films, and then they're going to team up somehow, who knows, bring in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen somehow. Like we're blowing this whole thing up. I think everyone wants their own cinematic universe. I don't necessarily throw a third one in there, finish out the trilogy, see if people latch onto that, and maybe go from there. Yeah, I don't know. I think even like you said, there's been so many iterations of Sherlock. The one thing that came to my mind was, did either of you guys watch the cartoon Sherlock Holmes of the 22nd century?
No.
Like they put him in the future, and he was like part robot. And as a
so
kid,
strange.
As a kid, I loved that. But then again, as a kid, you know, I'm gonna love anything that's, you know, sci-fi and whatnot. So maybe they're gonna go out of the box with it. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. And it's interesting because on clearly Downey wants to get back into sort of like the mystery detective genre again, because I believe that him and his wife produced Perry Mason on HBO, which is great. First of all, great show. If you have not watched Perry Mason, I highly, highly recommend watching it. It's a great throwback caper with amazing performances, especially from Matthew Rhys. So, like, I don't know. The content is out there. Yeah, it's a little dusty, but I think that's what, you know, that's what Knives Out did that was so well, is it sort of like deconstructed the genre and flipped it on its head and breathed new life into it. So I can't say that creating a cinematic universe is the way to go with Sherlock Holmes. Like that's, I think it's clear that Downey wants another franchise. You know, he wants another franchise that he can just do Iron Man with again, and that's just not the case. So I don't know, guys. Interesting sort of discussion here, notion of a Sherlock Holmes cinematic universe. Yeah, the shade being thrown to Knives Out, the Poirot stuff, and obviously the newly released Enola Holmes. Just come on, Downey, go back to doing prestige dramas. Well, that's what we want. We want to see.
I saw that comment.
Yeah. It's like I want the Oscar Robert Downey Jr. to come back. The guy who we all know is capable of giving these, like, you know, no more Dr. Dolittle, no more, you know, maybe one more Sherlock Holmes, but that's it. Anyways, guys, be sure to let us know your thoughts and opinions on that topic down in the comment section below. Okay, now moving on to the final news topic of today, and that has to do with Jamie Foxx and Electro. Now, I know this one dropped last week, but I didn't have a chance to cover it, and so we're going to be talking about it on today's show. So I pulled up the IGN article here, but I believe it first broke from Boris Kitt over at the Hollywood Reporter, and he was talking about the fact that Electro, specifically Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, was going to be returning to star in the MCU, and more specifically Tom Holland's Spider-Man 3. And of course, everyone reads that and we're like, that sounds fake. And then you read that it's from the Hollywood Reporter and it's like properly sourced and everything. And you're like, oh no, this is actually happening. We're getting Electro back in Spider-Man 3, which is just sort of a puzzling sort of thing. Even as a massive fan of that film, it's just sort of like, whoa, okay, what's going on here? And so naturally people were starting to speculate, does this mean that they're building up to a live action Spider-Verse movie? Are we going to see Andrew Garfield back in the suit? Are we going to see Tom Holland back in the suit and all that stuff? So Jamie Foxx then shed a little more light on this whole thing by posting to his Instagram basically this image here of the face of Electro, the 3 Spider-Men, and then with the caption of "Tell Spidey, let's run it back. Super excited to be part of the new Marvel Spider-Man or the new Marvel Spider-Man new installment. Can't wait for y'all to check this one out. But I won't be blue in this one. But 1,000% badass. Swipe left." So that's what he had to say about that, which I thought was pretty funny. So yeah, right. Obviously, Jamie Foxx played Electro back in 2014's The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Kind of a mixed reception on the character and the film as a whole. I am a massive defender of that film. I love it, and I actually do enjoy Jamie Foxx's Electro in it. I think he was an interesting character because while you felt sympathy for him, the movie sort of actively kind of beat him down. It was so mean-spirited towards him, so it was just sort of an interesting little debacle there. But I think his campiness and his over-the-top performance was interesting. And so I don't know, I dug it for the most part. But I have to say that I was surprised to see that of all villains returning to, Tom Holland's Spider-Man 3, it's going to be the main villain in a movie full of villains that was mixed, that wasn't necessarily received well by the masses. I guess prompted Sony to go running back to Marvel. So it's a weird sort of thing here. But Jared, let's get your take on this whole Electro news.
Yeah. When it was first announced, I think I was like, this is fake. Then I was like, what? And super excited. And now I'm like, huh? Because none of this necessarily makes sense. Is it going to be multiverse? Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, sure, cool that they're reprising the character. He's going to probably be different. If not, it's going to be a multiverse.
Right. I mean, he's probably going to have the wacky green and yellow outfit, I assume now, right?
Yep. Take that outfit, but obviously modernize it. The Vulture has wings.
I want it.
No?
I want it.
You want
100% campy, comic accurate. That's what I want.
Okay. You heard it here first. Scoop. Yeah, I think it's weird because again, we've had Spider-Man 3 different ones in the last 20 years. There's characters that they still haven't explored live action on the big screen. Kraven the Hunter. There's the Rhino, a proper version of him. That's one that I actually would love to see back.
Yeah, I know. There was I saw someone tweet. It's like you're telling me that one of the greatest cliffhangers ever. You're gonna bring back the guy who died in that movie and not the Rhino to finish out that whole cliffhanger. I don't know. I just thought that was pretty funny, and I'd actually love to see Paul Giamatti get another go at the Rhino. I just love that casting.
I mean, in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, I thought there was a lot of cool things that they were setting up with, the Sinister Six and everything like that. So who knows, cool, they're bringing him back. He's going to maybe be different outfit, same actor. Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, it's strange, too, that he posted that picture. It's very much fan art. It's not official, but it has the 3 different Spider-Men. It's a multiverse, but then it was taken down. So it's kind of is there something there, or are we reading too far into this as, you know, movie fans, comic book fans, and stuff like that?
Yeah, I don't know. Zach, what do you think about this?
Wow. So my biggest thing is why? Like, and not I'm not a big fan of the Andrew Garfield movies. I think that I slightly prefer the first one. So like, I'm not even a big fan of Electro in that. It's actually kind of the one few times that I'm not big on Jamie Foxx, and I'm a huge fan of his. So that's kind of the part of it. But also just like, one of the things I've admired the most about Tom Holland's Spider-Man is that there hasn't been Venom, there hasn't been Doc Ock, there hasn't been Green Goblin, like there hasn't been like the big. I mean, Mysterio is a big one, but at least he was in the second film, right? They've really gone to like kind of the B-list villain roster, and not that they're bad villains, but just they're not the most iconic ones. And they've allowed it to kind of go in a new territory. Like, there hasn't even been there hasn't been a Harry Osborn or a Norman Osborn. And
well, that's what I'm hoping we get that in the third one. Like at least Norman. Like, you need the Osborns in a Spider-Man film.
Yeah, but the restraint they've shown. So for them, the next thing they're going to do is like, they're going to bring back a guy who died in another Spider-Man's thing. Like, and just bringing Jamie Foxx back. It's hard for me to separate. Like, I have too much connection to knowing that he had a fully told story in a different universe's Spider-Man film that had like a beginning, middle, and end, and he died.
Right.
It's not the same to me as them bringing back J.K. Simmons, because he's essentially playing a bit like J. Jonah Jameson was a bit part, more or less.
Right.
There wasn't like an arc there. I can kind of, it doesn't break my immersion at all for them to bring him back. So I just don't understand why that's the route they're going down, especially the way that Far From Home ended off. That's like a really interesting direction to get in with the mid-credit sequence where people know that Spider-Man's Peter Parker. And I was kind of hoping that the third movie would be like an exploration of that, and there's maybe a peripheral villain, but like they're just bringing back Electro. Like, why don't they go somewhere?
Yeah.
Why don't they go somewhere new? You know. Well,
I guess the other thing is like, I agree with you, and actually I do have another issue with this that I'll bring up in a second, but it's like, oh man, I think I lost my train of thought. Anyways, the issue that I was going to bring up beforehand is like, we are now going to be 3 films into this Tom Holland universe, and we haven't really properly seen Spider-Man in New York doing Spider-Man things, dealing with his own thing. Like, it's been like sort of tied down by like Iron Man or the Avengers or stuff like that. And like, while I enjoyed Far From Home, I want to see Spider-Man being Spider-Man in New York. Like, it's such an integral part of the character. And so now it seems like they're not even going to give him a chance to do that. They're just going to immediately dump Spider-Verse on him. And so like, Tom Holland is becoming the Spider-Man that is just like in these weird sort of like event comic like, adventures. Like, he's not getting the individual stories that he probably deserves to get. Yeah. And I was always a fan of the idea of this Spider-Man film with the main villain being like Kraven. And it's like, now with his identity out there, you have this like this pompous wild guy who's like on the hunt to literally kill Peter Parker because he knows who he is. He's hired by like, I don't know, Norman Osborn or something like that. Like, there's so many interesting routes you can go with that. And on top of that, incorporating into the fact that maybe he's gonna need a lawyer, and so maybe we introduce like She-Hulk or Matt Murdock or something like that to be his defense attorney or something like that, as like the city's gonna hold him accountable for like killing killing Mysterio. I don't know. They may still do that, but to me, it's already starting to sound like this movie is like overstuffed. And like, I guess the question is like, I don't know how big of a role Electro is going to have in this film. I assume it's going to be very small, as it probably should be. I don't think Electro needs a massive role in this film, but if you're going to set him up to be in a Spider-Verse movie, I don't know. It is interesting. I do think they have a loophole. So by the fact that like, Electro was killed by the electricity, and you could just like go with the fact that he just sort of like transferred to another dimension basically through the whatever science shit that just happened. And so
Science.
yeah, exactly. They can sort of like make it work there. But it is interesting. I am excited to see them get weird and to see them see Jamie Foxx reprise his role, probably be given just with the character treated better and what like that does excite me. But it is like I don't know, it is sort of like an interesting choice just in terms of the villain. But I also do think that this means that we will be getting Tobey Maguire back and we will be getting Andrew Garfield back. I just hope it's not in this third film and that maybe it's like an event team up film down the road, because the return of Maguire and Garfield will overshadow Tom Holland in his own movie. Again, going back to the fact that he hasn't really gotten the through and through Spidey adventure that he deserves. And so if they're going to do this, make it like a post-credit scene or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that's the thing is I'm glad you brought that up, because that's exactly kind of where my brain was going, where it's a post-credit scene, because we haven't gotten is he the main villain? Is he a side villain? Is he the opening? Is he the closing? I think the way that I'm making this up in my mind is, yes, it's a post-credits thing that teases him, getting shocked at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, somehow getting transported, scienced over to this universe, and then that opens the door, like you're saying, to all of these other Spider-Man movies somehow be filtering into this, Spider-Man 5 or 6 down the road.
Right, yeah. Zach?
Yeah, I just I don't even know what direction they could take it in. It's just weird. It's just a weird thing. And I also as far as the multiverse thing for Spider-Man goes, like you know why Into the Spider-Verse works as a movie? Because it's animated.
Yeah.
Because it's animated. If you were to like imagine making that movie live action.
Well, I think they're going to try and make it live action. Well, we'll see what happens.
But that movie would be the most ridiculous movie in live action. Like it would not work.
Bring in Spider-Ham, man.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I think there are. I agree with you. I think there are elements that make Spider-Verse work in animated form more so than, than live action. But what I will say though is that Spider-Verse proved you can have all of these elements in there, and you can have all these just like strange things going on, but you can still tell a really emotional and compelling story with your lead character at the heart of the film. So to play devil's advocate to what I was just saying, maybe they can find a way to keep the focus on Holland and just use like Maguire and Garfield and Electro as just like things to entice audiences to go see it. I mean, listen, it's already a Spider-Man movie. Audiences are going to go see it. But if you bring them in, like, oh my God, they're going to show up in boatloads. So, I think if they find a way to keep the focus on Tom Holland or something like that, then I'll feel a little more comfortable with it. I still don't want this to be his third film. Like, we just had Endgame. We just had, like, his entanglement with the Avengers. Let him be his own person. Let him be his own hero, which is ultimately the lesson he has to learn in Far From Home. So it's like, let's just like take a step back and let Tom Holland deal with the repercussions of what's just happened with him. So that's ultimately where I stand on that story. Any sort of just follow-up thoughts before we close this show out?
Just that I agree. I think Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man there's ever been. I think he's the best, and I think on the Peter Parker front and the Spider-Man front, like he's just, and him doing his own stunts and everything. Like this kid is amazing, and I wanted to play Spider-Man for like 20 more years, right? Like I want to be like 50-year-old Spider-Man, but. He needs to be able to breathe, and I think that Far From Home did enough to let him do that.
Yeah,
but like Homecoming's full of Iron Man, and the Avengers movies and Civil War they're what they are, right? He's Spider-Man's a bit part in those movies. So I want Tom Holland to kind of be given his due, which I don't think he has been yet.
Yeah, and that third film hopefully would do that. Yeah, Jared, any closing thoughts?
If they are connecting these universes, bring back Bonesaw.
Bonesaw is ready. I want to see that, Randy Savage. That'd be
Unfortunately,
so good.
he's passed, so they'd have to find someone else.
They'd have to. Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Anyways, be sure to let us know your thoughts and opinions on Jamie Foxx's Electro returning to the, I guess, he's returning to Spider-Man, but he's going to be in the MCU, I guess, officially here. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you think this means we're getting the live-action Spider-Verse film? If it's so, I'm going to be very happy to see Andrew Garfield's character, and I hope that they give him the proper send-off he deserves. That man got shafted. Let's have a great conversation down in the comment section below. And with that, guys, that's going to do it for today's episode of Film Forum. Covered a lot of ground, a lot of topics, a lot of conversation. Thank you all for being a part of it. And thank you to my two guests for joining me here, Zach, Jared. Zach, where can everyone find you?
Yeah, so I'm on all my social media. It's Zach, ZACHB, as in Bob, Marsh, MARSH. So Zach B. Marsh on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. I would recommend Letterboxd mainly for people here because that's where I talk about every film that I watch. I just put up a great review of The Invisible Man that I'm very proud of. So if people could read that, that'd be awesome. And then Twitter is just I post about everything. And Instagram, I barely use. So that's kind of my ranking of where you should follow me. I am on YouTube as well. I'm kind of planning on getting into making some kind of YouTube channel about film. I've got a couple filmmaking things that I've put up that I did in the Grand Theft Auto 5 editor that are kind of interesting.
Oh, wow.
So I think I sent them to you, Griffin. I think you've seen them. Yeah. And so, you can follow me here too. It's just Zach Marsh. I think you just search that. I don't think I have a username.
Well, we'll see. Sometimes Sean, with Sean Chandler, Sean's you'll either find a football player or me. I think nine times out of 10 though, you're going to find Sean Chandler.
I think there's actually there is actually a football player on here named Zach Marsh. I think
everyone has football players, man. I can't. I'm jealous. Anyways, anyways, Jared, thanks for joining me, buddy. Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, no, Griff, as always, appreciate you inviting me over to talk about movies and all sorts of Spider-Man stuff. You guys can find me here on YouTube at JBuck Studios. I'm doing, reviews, ending explain videos. I have a live show every Tuesday. Basically, if you like Netflix stuff, I review pretty much everything Netflix because I'm a greedy man getting those screeners. So yeah, check me out over there on JBuck Studios. Otherwise, Twitter, Instagram, other social media at Jared Buckendall. And I also have a Twitch channel I don't utilize too much, but if you want to watch me play video games horribly, jump over to JBuck Studios on Twitch as well.
Hey, and for all you people who need content created, edited, graphics made, he also has a Room?
Yeah, Room 56 Studios. I started up a company with a buddy, so we do audio engineering, music, video production, all of that stuff. So if you guys need any work, jump over there or DM me, slide into those DMs.
Do it, guys. You won't regret it. And of course, guys, if you haven't done so already, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the FilmSpeak channel because we'd love to have you be a part of the conversation that we're having basically every day over here. So if you like more insight, analysis, and interviews behind your favorite entertainment, you're definitely in the right place. You can also like FilmSpeak on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, just search FilmSpeak. And if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right. Thank you all for joining me on this episode of Film Forum, and we will catch you back here next time. Take care.